right, so let's learn about boundaries and saying no without actually saying no. There are so many ways to say no without actually using the word no. Granted, no is a full sentence, but let's dive into it. If you're a people pleaser or recovering people pleaser, or even like Enneagram 1 or 2, twos mostly, I'm a two-wing 1, it can be very hard and uncomfortable to set boundaries, and then having to reinforce them, which I'll talk about as well, can also be like jarring to your soul because you want to help, but it's a mixture of like you want to be of service, but you're also people pleasing, and you don't know how to stay of service without people pleasing. Yes, you can. So the first thing I want you to understand, it doesn't matter if you're a coach, a content writer, a virtual assistant, this applies to everybody. You have to understand that if you're in business and you're a business owner, you not setting the boundaries, you not verbalizing them or having them written down anywhere, and then having to constantly reinforce those boundaries with clients who are not fitting your business is so detrimental to your profitability, to your productivity, to your mental health, like everything. It just will barrel it all. And so there's different ways to say no without saying no. Let's just get into that. One, you can just state, you know, here's a good one that I like doing. I'm not able to meet that request at this time. I can do it X. Or, I'm not able to meet this request. It is not under the scope of the project. You give some sort of like no and either an option or why. And it's a why without being explaining. I can't do this because I'm so busy. I'm so sorry. Blah, blah, blah. Try not to say sorry. But if sorry comes out of your mouth, work that out. Because it's not necessarily that you need to apologize if, especially, that person either never knew your boundary. It's okay not to apologize, or they keep constantly breaking your boundaries. So just a statement. I am not able to meet this request. I'm not able to meet this last minute request. That is not within my scope. I would love to discuss the scope with you and potentially, a separate contract, whatever it is. A lot of the times when, especially you're new or you're in a very busy scaling season, you start to say yes to a whole bunch of things. And that's not necessarily bad, but it can get to a point that if you start saying yes to things that are breaking your boundaries, you then have to re-educate the people around you because they didn't know what your boundaries were because you didn't say them. So that first type of barrier there can be, okay, let's just get back to center. Let's neutralize this, and then we can go forward. And yes, especially for us people pleasers, it does unfortunately start with us. We will sabotage our own boundaries constantly. But when in doubt, yes, you can say no. If that's the only thing that's going to come out of your mouth, that's totally fine. I personally, especially for my own sake, I prefer saying no rather than I'm sorry. No is so much better than I'm sorry. And it's not because you're not trying to be personable, you're not trying to be hospitable, you're not trying to provide good customer service. I notice a lot of the times for service providers that start with, I'm sorry, I can't do this, but whatever it is, it changes their energy, and and you dig more into that people pleasing, that you feel bad, that you're going to disappoint them, that, you have to do something to make it better. That's not necessarily it. Your ideal client will respect your boundaries. Your ideal client will honor your boundaries, and your ideal client will also protect your boundaries. Now, what does that mean? So if you've in the past told someone that you work with who is an ideal client, I have a boundary of, I'm a virtual assistant, but I do not do content creation. And then you have somebody consistently asking you to create content and you're doing it so poorly because that is not your strength. You give them the boundary, but you have to enforce that boundary. If you want to learn that, that's a different story. But you have to enforce that boundary. And then if you have an ideal client who knows that, they will not put you in that position. So they will be protecting you. They will not be putting you in that position. They're not going to be like, hey, can you make this? Hey, can you make this? When you already said my boundary of working with you, the scope of work, whichever you want to say your boundary is, I am not doing content creation. Great. They won't be asking for that. So they'll be protecting you. They'll be honoring it. And everything will make so much more sense without having somebody drop the ball somewhere when it was just not your strength. So boundaries should always play to your strengths, always be tied to one of your core values, and protect your mental health. And a whole bunch of other things, but like those are the three key things. And then other ways you can just give your boundaries, honestly, is living your boundaries. That you're not saying yes to things that are breaking your boundaries. That you're not breaking other people's boundaries. That's a big one. It's very hard to honor your own boundaries if you keep consistently breaking somebody else's boundary. Because honestly, I think everybody's default boundary should be, I will not break other people's boundaries. And that gives you a sort of respect, not only internally, but for everybody that you work with. So just keep in mind that really, if you dishonor your boundaries, if somebody else disrespects your boundaries, there's something unaligned there that you need to refine that alignment that you had maybe at some point before you burn out. Consistently broken boundaries will lead to burnout. And then that's a hard hole to dig out of. It's not impossible, but it's a hard hole to dig out of. And I don't want to see anybody burning their business to the ground because they had a whole slew of clients around them that would constantly break their boundaries, or I had a whole slew of clients that probably wouldn't break their boundaries if they knew what they were. So if you can't feel comfortable giving your boundaries to a client, they might not be your ideal client. Or you also might need some mindset coaching, which is fine either way. It's getting to that awareness level that you need so you can move forward.